Hi, I'm going to show you today how to figure out how wide your bow needs to be, how long it needs to be, and how many of these streamers would best complement your tree. So let's get started. The dimensions of the bow that you want to order are going to be determined by the height of your tree and the width of your tree. So if we look at a standard Christmas tree, and standard means non-pencil, those are different. It makes, of course, the classic triangle shape. If you can draw a line down the sides of the tree, I sort of think of these as the linear edges. And you want your bow, the edges of your bow, to fall within the linear edges of that tree. This chart is a good guide based on the height of your tree. If, however, you're able to measure your tree, I'll show you a much more precise method, and all you need is a ruler. So what you're going to do is you're going to measure from the tip of your tree down a certain number of inches, and then measure at that spot, measure from tip to tip, and that will tell you how wide of a bow you need. Now, how far down do you start measuring? I base that on the height of my tree. If I have a 6-foot tree, I'm going to come down about 6 inches. If I have a 9-foot tree, I'm going to come down about 9 inches, 8 to 9 inches. So let's do this 6-foot tree. I want to come down about 5 to 6 inches from the very top. And then once I have that, I'm going to flip my ruler around and measure across from tip to tip of those pine boughs. And that will give you a precise measurement for how wide you want that bow. Now you can see this one measured 12 inches wide. So 12 inches would make the perfect size. Let's look at one on the tree. So here is a 12-inch wide bow on this tree. You can go up or down an inch or two from what you measured. So let's go up a little bit. Here's a 14-inch wide. It still looks nice. You can make a 14-inch work. I still think I like the way that 12-inch looked better. I wouldn't go much below whatever you measure, maybe by about 1 inch. So I don't think I would go any less than about 11 inches for this, for the 12 inches that I just measured there. So now let's measure this 9-foot tree. So for a 9-foot tree, we're going to come down 8 to 9 inches from the very tip. From that point, you will rotate your ruler and measure across from tip to tip. And you can see here we get about 16 inches. So let's put a 16-inch bow on this tree. I think that is absolutely perfect. It complements the linear edges of this tree perfectly. You could go up a little bit to a 17 or 18-inch bow. That would work. You could come down an inch or two. Let's look at a 14-inch bow on this tree. I think that still works very nicely. So once you get your width, in this case 16 inches, stay within 1 to 2 inches either up or down of that width, and that'll give you the perfect size. Now, one caveat for an artificial tree: before you take your measurement, make sure you fluffed up all your branches. If you pull this tree out of the box and the branches are all squished down, that's going to throw off your measurement. So fluff it up first to make sure that you get an accurate reading. So let's talk about the length of your bow. The things affecting the length are going to be the height of your tree, how far down you want the cascading streamers to go, and whether or not you're going to curl your ribbons. So your first choice is, do you want the streamers to cascade down your tree? And if you want them to cascade down your tree, how far down the tree do you want them to cascade? Do you want them to go about 1/3 of the way down, halfway down, or all the way down? So let's break down those factors and look at the height of your tree first. Now, something people don't think about is when we refer to the height of a tree, we're talking about from the top of the tree all the way down to the floor. This is my 6-foot tree. But the branches of the tree don't actually go all the way down to the floor. There's what I call the floor gap. And that for the standard tree, that floor gap is about a foot, about 12 inches. So when I'm thinking about my 6-foot tall tree here, because I've got about a foot of space between the bottom branches and the floor, the actual tree itself is only about 5 feet long. When I look at my 9-foot tree here, because of my foot gap down there, the tree itself is only about 8 feet long. So I'm going to consider that when I'm ordering the length of my bow. Now let's see what happens if we're going to curl this versus not curl our ribbons. We're going to look at this 6-foot tree, and we're going to put this 5-foot bow on this 6-foot tree. This first photo represents the streamers not being curled, and you can see how they come down not really just to the bottom but a little bit past it. Now look what happens when I curl these streamers. You can lose anywhere from 6 inches all the way to a foot depending on the type of ribbon whenever you curl the streamers. So for the length of our bow, we're going to think about how tall is our tree. Are we going to curl the streamers or not curl the streamers? And are we going to have our streamers come down, part of the way of our tree or all the way down? Now let's look at some examples on the trees themselves. And we'll start with this 6-foot tree. So here we have a 2.5-foot bow on this 6-foot tree. And you see that it comes about 1/4 to 1/3 of the way down the overall length of the tree. Here we have a 5-foot bow on this 6-foot tree, and it comes almost all the way down to the bottom. If I had not curled these ribbons, it actually would come all the way down to the bottom. And now let's look at our 9-foot tree. So here we have a bow head only with no cascading streamers. Here we have a 5-foot bow. So this 5-foot bow on the 9-foot tree comes not quite halfway down, almost halfway down the length of this tree. And this 8-foot bow comes almost all the way down to the bottom. Again, it would have come all the way down to the bottom if I had not curled it. To determine how many streamers you want, you're going to consider the width of your tree and how full it is. For smaller trees that don't have that aren't very wide or very full, you can do a lower count streamers. I have 9 on this one. But for a very large full tree, you'll probably want to go with a higher streamer count to make sure you're getting coverage on all the sides. And if you think about a front-facing bow on a tree that's sitting up against a wall, which is the typical setup, you've got to have coverage on the front and on both sides. And if you don't have enough streamers, then you won't get as good coverage around the sides of your tree, and I'm going to show you that on here in just a moment. Here is that 6-foot tree that isn't particularly wide or full, and I have put a bow on here with 9 cascading streamers. And you see that gives us good coverage. I've got some even coming over here on the corners, and I've got nice spacing between my ribbons so that you can see your ornaments underneath there. Now I'm showing you this same bow with the 13 count streamers, and you can see how much more coverage you get on here, in particular around the sides. You actually get a lot more coverage with a 13 count. And again, this was a small tree. For this big, very wide and full 9-foot tree, I certainly would have done the 13 count over the 9 count streamers.